you guys may remember a short film I made a while ago called In Your Honor, or 2308, which more or less reimagined the backstory of James, as well as completely took his basis and flipped it on its head. James is canonically not a Dean Goods. He is technically an LNYR Class 28, and more or less has been since Audrey created him, or decided that for him. I don't know about you guys, but I never really liked this basis. But James aside did have an affinity for the Dean Goods. One day a while ago, me and my brother were talking about this, and the idea of making James such came about. It wasn't an idea I took very crazily at first. I definitely enjoyed it, but it was more just something fun. I mean, one of my favorite classes of engine being turned into my favorite character, it just kinda worked out. And while I knew many people wouldn't agree with this basis, it was still something I thought would be fun. And him being more into history than trains, we talked about what the exact backstory would be. Just kinda bouncing ideas back and forth and trying to create a narrative for the character. As those of you who have already watched 2308 likely know, my brother actually recently passed. It was then the smaller idea I had turned into something a little bit more serious. And in his honor, I wanted to officially make the story and finally make the locomotive as well. Hence the name of the short film. I got the Oxford Rail 2308 model and quickly got to work, with the original modifications being as simple could get. Remove the smokebox door, add a face, add some smaller details from the detail pack, and while I wanted to weather him and maybe even add a front pony truck, I ultimately decided against this, as these models aren't necessarily the cheapest, and I didn't want to hold production back even longer. For filming purposes, I would settle with leaving the model largely as is. Since then, 2308 has went through quite a few changes, but nothing really too drastic. He now features a larger and much fatter face, which some people hate, but I have to say I quite enjoy. I don't know, it just feels very Audrey to me. And every day I'm back and forth with finally weathering the model since I'm a little bit more experienced now. But as you can see here, it's still not something I've actually done yet. As much as I love 2308 and the unique livery it has, I couldn't help but constantly imagine what James would look like if he was actually a Dean Goods, or more specifically, a Dean Goods in red. And this was a project I was inevitably going to do after making 2308. So one day recently, I bit the bullet and got a new Dean Goods, this time in the black World War II livery. And my plans for this one were quite simple. Make an actual James model, or something that at least resembled James, livery-wise. The model was pretty quickly primed, even though I did sport it for quite a while in just the normal black livery. I don't know, I like wartime liveries, you guys know me. But this wouldn't last for too long, and eventually the model was coated in Tamiya primer. I let this dry for about a day or two, and then came in with my red Tamiya spray paint, specifically the TS8, or Italian red, and again waited about a day for that to sit. Once the red had dried, I wanted to add some smaller details in black. And that was all applied pretty quickly, and thankfully pretty nicely, since I did have a little bit of help. My wife is often pretty good at fixing the mistakes I make in painting, or just doing what I say I can't. So soon James's tinder was done, his wheel arches were done, his footplate was done, basically his main paintwork was complete. And though it looked a little bit shocking, without a front pony truck and all, it was something I really enjoyed the look of. There was one thing I knew James needed, however, and that was lining, as well as a number 5 to go on his tinder. So I sent him off to Lego Master, and he actually did all of that for me. And here are some amazing behind-the-scenes pictures of what that looked like, all of which come from him.
James, he asked, why are you red? I am a splendid engine, answered James, ready for anything. You never see my paint dirty. Oh, that's why you once needed bootlaces. To be ready, I suppose.
I commissioned that from him and very quickly got the model back. However, unfortunately, USPS doesn't really often like model trains, and the box would take a couple of bumps, thus meaning the lining itself came off in a couple of places, and unfortunately was a bit bumpy because of that. It was at this moment I had a choice. I could either send him back and get him relined, I could try to paint it over, or I could do what I was always scared to do with 2308, and that is weather the hell out of the model, and that's kind of what I did. If James is already going to be a Dean Goods and look nothing like how people expect him to, why not make him dirty as well, and just go all out on a very unique James? I plan on using him for freight work anyway. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the final product. Here is my custom, very turdy, and very unique Dean Goods James, or as I sometimes call him, the Big Red Bloke. And I have to admit, for being a model that ended up more freelance than anything, I really enjoy the final product. I was back and forth with extending his running plate and adding a pony truck for a while, but I want this model to match 2308 more closely, despite being painted to look more like James. Maybe one day I'll buy a third Dean Goods and extend that running plate, but for now, here is the duo. Finally seeing a red Dean Goods next to 2308, at least in my mind, really just affirmed that he and I had a good idea, and hopefully he enjoys it just as much as I do, since at the end of the day, this is more or less all in his honor.